Stay in your lane. Good afternoon, coaches. Today's activity is an idea for how we can work on a couple of different focus points for defending in 1v1 scenarios, specifically body shape, angle, timing of how we close down the defender, and a couple of habits, forcing wide, cutting off line, obviously those are two separate ones, but here's a way in which we could accomplish all of those in a very realistic way with attack, defending, and transitions. So basic premise, you have a field about 20 yards long, 15 yards wide, and the 15-yard width is divided into 3 lanes. We have lane A, B, and C. Now the basic premise is the player in blue, who is defending the south line, passes the ball across, and the yellow attacker's job is to try to cross the end line with possession. Now the trick here is, whichever lane they cross, there's a different point value that only the defenders get to know. And the point value is really going to be the incentive for how our defender operates. Are they going to try to force wide because the value of the outside lanes are worth a little bit less? If we incentivize lane B as being valued at 2 points, the defender is really going to try hard to force the attacker wide to a lesser point value lane, most likely to lane A, which is worth 0 points. If, however, you would like your defender to try to cut off line, you would adjust your lane point values as necessary, because by incentivizing a certain lane over another, it's going to encourage the players to really try hard to, if lane B is worth 0 points, they're going to really try hard to cut off the line to force that player back into the middle, so that when the attacker crosses the end line, they score fewer points. Now this does put the onus on the coach to maintain, keep track of the score, which is a little bit of a tricky one, but at the end of the day, really we want to make it as real as possible. And when we play in a game, if we're doing 1v1, our opposition doesn't necessarily know what our principle is, or our habits are. Is it to force wide or force the middle? We don't tell them that, they just have to figure it out, which does provide the attacker in this situation a little bit more of a realistic manner to attack, because they do know that one of these lanes is worth more than the other. They know that one is not worth anything, so they really have to then read the cues of the defender to try to navigate that 1v1. And of course, if the defender does win the ball, they counter, and whatever lane they cross, as long as they cross the ball in possession, they get 1 point. And so we would have it set up so that this team in blue would go for a certain amount of time or to a certain amount of points before they completely switch. And once they switched, you would change the lane point value. And depending on an individual, you might even have a slightly game within a game and challenge one player, like, hey, can you really try to get them to this lane versus another, to really work on those individual habits within the context of the overall defending situation. And depending on the number of players you have, if you have 6 to 8, if we're working with smaller, the littler ones, one grid like this would probably be sufficient. If, however, you're working with a bigger group, 12 or more, maybe you have a parent who can jump in and kind of keep track of points for the second grid. But by making a couple of grids, you want to really maintain as much ball movement as possible. For something like this, 1 to 2 work to rest ratio is pretty good. You can do 1 to 3 at most, but you really want to try to get players involved as much as possible. Stay in your lane. Body shape, position, angle, timing, 1v1 defending. Cheers.